Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another of the Horse Tribe webinars. We've got a series of incredible experts, all willing to share their great knowledge and understanding with the Horse Tribe. And remember, you can ask your own questions and make sure that you get the answers that are really relevant to you. So tonight we have Dee So'oailo of Dynamic Sports Performance. Dee is a specialist in sports therapy, and she's going to talk tonight about whether we are fit to ride. And by that, really what we're trying to do is highlight investing in ourselves as much as investing in our horses in terms of fitness, health and well-being, etc. So Dee's got lots of information and tips to share with you tonight. But first of all, just a little bit of a tech check. First of all, just to let you know that this is being recorded, and that's so that you can watch it again and again afterwards, and the recording will be sent out in a day or so. Secondly, I want to just let you know, if you haven't used Zoom before, if you have a look in between the little thumbnail where I am and the slides that Dee's just altering there, you can see that there's a grey line. Now, if you hover on that grey line, there's a couple of little grey lines right in the middle, and if you click and hold on that, you can drag left and drag right, and you can make the slides a bit bigger if that helps you to see things. The third thing I want to highlight is that we're using the Q&A function. So if you have a look down the bottom, move your mouse down the bottom of your screen, you can see there's Q&A, and you can pop any questions that come up to you in there. Please do ask questions. We've had a lot sent to us before the webinar tonight, which we'll be talking through as well. But please do ask them, because it really will help you learn. And then the final thing, just to mention, I will mention again at the end, is that there's a really short survey at the end, and it's just to get an idea of what was helpful for you tonight, what you liked, and what you might want to see next time, which will really help us with future webinars. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dee, who is going to talk through her slides tonight and help us understand if we're fit to ride. So welcome, Dee.
Hi.
Hey, and I will disappear and let you have the centre stage. So I'll see you at the next Q&A bit. Okay, bye for now.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. So I just thought it was useful to obviously put a little bit about myself. So I started Dynamic Sports Performance in 2014. And I'm very lucky to really just specialise in working with elite level horses and riders. I started off, obviously, I specialise in soft tissue, but I've gone on to now where basically, because I obviously know the horses and riders so well on a soft tissue side of things, what I noticed throughout my career, I suppose, is how much the riders needed to work on their own strength conditioning. So obviously a lot of the issues, I suppose, that I found in terms of with soft tissue injuries and repetitive strain, etc., was often because a lot of the riders weren't working on themselves off the horse. So that's where the rider S&C came in, and being very discipline specific, I just really work with the Olympic disciplines. It's just really important to know what you're working with. Obviously, how you'd work with polo players is so different. So I typically work with the Olympic disciplines. Then obviously, through knowing the horse and rider separately as athletes, it was really important to see them together. So that's where the biomechanics and the analysis all came in. So really, that's a lot of like slow-mo video footage, and just going through things, whether that's even in the coaching session, so that we link everything together. And that's why I say about a holistic package, because I think it's really important that I work closely with the coaches and the sort of backroom staff, so that basically the horse and rider, we know that we're giving them the best chance basically of performing well. And I think as well, it's something probably to say a bit more about, and that I think that's something that's missing in equestrian sport a lot, and it's missing sometimes at the top level, not all the time, thankfully, and it's getting so much better, but that's probably another thing that we can sort of talk about, just that at lower levels to try and, you know, as much as you can work as a team, because it doesn't matter what level you're working at, obviously everyone working together will improve your performance at whatever level that is. Obviously the games are on, we're doing very well, which is very exciting, but there is, I would say there is a new era in equestrian sport, in that now riders are a lot more aware that they, you know, you're just not going to win gold medals, or you're not even in general terms, you know, or on any aspect of performance. It's really important for riders to think of themselves as athletes. Unfortunately, at the moment, to be honest, to date, there is very little evidence-based research in regards to the physiological demands and the physical characteristics needed for equestrian sport. But what I've put in here is the British Equestrian Federation's, it's the LTPD model, you can see below. And basically they're the sort of, that's been put into frameworks. It is slightly old now, but you can see really the different areas. And what you can see in there is that they put a lot of thing of just basically that you've got to be looking at yourself. There's a real correlation between improving yourself off the horse and obviously on the horse. So there's a lot of emphasis on functional stability, mobility, you know, obviously symmetry, balance, etc. So that's really highlighted in there. And then as you go down the levels, you'll see that there's a bit more of a structured training program in regards to, you're looking at, you know, yearly planning. Then obviously once you're getting trained for the excellence, it's the 4 yearly. So I'm going to concentrate more on the learning to take part, the training to improve. But you can see in there that they're kind of the major things that come up in regards to, so functional stability and mobility would be something that I really talk about a lot today. And if anyone's got any questions on it, please let me know, but hopefully I do cover as much as possible. But they're the main things to focus on. It's really good because it does show how much emphasis they put on, you know, riders basically doing things off of the horse. I've put athletes here because so much of the time, and it really is changing. It's changed a lot as well since I started the business, of the riders thinking of themselves as athletes, not just the horse. So I've put in what is regarded as an athlete, the sort of meaning, if you like. So a thorough understanding of the specific physiological requirements and performance-related fitness variables in a sport is necessary for an athlete's strength, and additionally, conditioning of energy demands to be specifically prepared, thus ensuring effective transfer of physical improvements from the gym to the specific sport setting. So the things that really riders want to be focusing on is posture. I think most people are aware of that, but very much that's your shoulder girdle control. You know, it's just, you know, just in general. And the other thing I really want to point out is what you do on a general day-to-day basis will probably be the most, that will be what makes the most difference. So just how you walk, how you stand, how you sit, you know, people that sit in an office, etc. That will probably have the biggest link onto the horse, if anything. Balance, obviously really, really important in equestrian sport, one of the most important. Trunk stability, your body composition. So again, like different disciplines have different requirements typically. So you will see that, you know, particularly if we look at the Olympics, you'll see this specific, you know, typically you get a certain type of person that's, you know, across the sports. And unfortunately, that is a fact of life. But it's just about, if you don't possess some of those qualities, how can you improve yourself? Your isometric strengths, that's typically your quads, calves, etc. Then training aerobic versus anaerobic. And like I said here, what you do every day impacts your performance. That is really the biggest thing I can say at sort of a more, you know, whether that be amateur or professional, to be truthful. And the reason I've got a bike and a rider little thing in there is because they're in British cycling. They used to have a guy called Sir Dave Brailsford, and basically he brought in the philosophy of marginal gains theory, and it's something that I try and do a lot, and I would really encourage you guys to try and get into that. So it's basically, he took, you know, what does it take to ride a bike, literally, and stripped it completely back, but looking at the most minute details. And obviously, if you improve 1% of all of those little details, it makes a massive difference when you add them all up. So that's what I try and say to people in regards to when they're riding. Try and think about all of those little points and how you can improve them. And that will have such a massive effect on you know, your performance, but also just on an enjoyment basis, etc. Like I said, discipline specific is really key. I don't know what disciplines you guys do, or just on an all-round basis, but I thought it's important to put in there so that you can, if you do a particular discipline, you get an idea as to what you should be concentrating on. But also, if you do like all round, it will probably give you a bit more of a gauge as to some of the things you concentrate on, like should be concentrating on from a fitness perspective, and, you know, strength conditioning. So the dressage, obviously an independent seat's the key thing, but your big thing really for dressage is your shoulder girdle control, core, you know, scapula, etc. You've obviously got to be able to guide the horse, allow the horse's movement underneath you while staying stable. You know, and all of these, like for example, the big thing as well when I talk about an independent seat, particularly in dressage, is you really want to, I always try to think of saying to people like 1, 2, 3, 4, my legs, all working independently, and this being your real strong support system. So, you know, you've got to be able to, for example, have one leg, you know, isometric, and then the other moving, and just staying stable. That the stability in dressage is probably the key thing. So that's a real big aspect of what we look at in dressage. So your shoulder girdle control, core stability, and that's got to be functional as well. Thoracic rotation. You know, pelvic issues come up quite a lot in dressage. It's just, you know, very much like out of probably all of the disciplines, to be truthful. Then show jumping, you've obviously got to manage your takeoff, your landing. It's also about like your proprioception. You'll see a lot of riders where they bring their leg back. So it's just about your isometric strength again there. You've got to think about obviously managing your distances, shortening, lengthening strides. They all require a lot of posterior strength, basically. So they're major things that we work on with show jumpers. The eventers, it's a lot of endurance. I think that's been shown a lot at Tokyo at the moment. It is really a test of endurance, the cross-country phase. But really, it's, you know, you've got a lot of pulling strength going into that. You also want to ride, obviously, as you know, as economically as possible, basically. So not to tire yourself too much, be loose through the knees, but you need to be very, very strong. Your upper body and your lower body need to be exceptionally strong. So your core endurance. There's lots of different things that go into that, because obviously you've got all of the different disciplines, but they're sort of some of the major things that we concentrate on. But it's really about trying to put them all, I would say, if you're just sort of all round, try and think about all of these different points of what you kind of want to be focusing on. So what do we commonly see and how do we correct it? So this is actually a video of me recently, videoing someone. So we will then go through like different angles and things like that. But what I would say is a really important, like videoing, it's so important to do. And also everybody learns really differently. So, resume share. There we go. Hopefully you can all still see me now. Yeah, basically it's really important to video. Everyone learns really differently, so being able to see what you're doing makes a massive difference, but obviously you've got to be able to feel. So one of the things I would say is a really good thing to just start off with is think of a stool. So obviously you've got your 3 points. You need to be thinking, can you feel both your seat bones? Can you feel your pubic bone? And just start you know, it is very, I don't believe you can teach feel on a horse in sort of the basic term of it, if you like, but you can definitely become a lot more, my thing that I try and get riders to do is become a lot more self-aware as to what they're actually doing, rather than just riding. You often see like people, you know, just going round and round the school and but there's no progress. You know, you're better off thinking, okay, what am I actually wanting from this? And we can go through, I've put later on down some sort of goal setting, but I would say when you go into an arena, you should be thinking, what am I actually wanting to get out of this? Obviously, enjoyment's got to be the key element, but you know, it is important not to just go round and round and round and round and not really get anywhere. So videoing to be able to see what you're actually doing can often help you, and then, you know, it enables you to feel a little bit more as well because you've seen it. But the big things really that you do get, and I'm sure that for all of you, just because it's common across the board, you'll have one of these 4 things. So collapsing, I've written slinky there because, you know, those little old school slinkies, I try and say to people about thinking of them as your rib cage, and you obviously want it to be as long as possible, and you don't want to be trying to touch one, you don't want one area to close because then you're collapsing, and you know, one side's becoming closer than the other as such. Twisting, so rotating the upper thoracic. A lot of riders, people say, let me just put my thing there, a lot of riders will do this. The reason why, people think it's actually like just a really bad habit, but actually it's because they're trying to create stability through their lats. So that's often a thing that sometimes I'll see riders doing. And also just another like little thing like to say is, I always say to people, imagine if I cut your reins, would you either be here or, you know, over there somewhere? You've got to be able to absorb that horse's movement without the need to be completely on its mouth, basically. Fixing, so that's, yeah, a lack of trunk stability, and a lot of people will use their knees, for example. You can see the knees like creeping up, particularly one side. A lot of people will sit left as well. I've gone on to that later on in terms of where you see particular patterns in riders. So that comes up a lot, people sitting over to the left but collapsing right. Shifting, so exactly that, the weight distributed more to one side of the saddle, but then riders will say, oh, it's drifting out to the left, for example. That's a common thing. But yeah, from a soft tissue basis, but also biomechanics, pelvic dysfunction is probably one of the biggest things that I see on a, you know, on an everyday basis, and that's sort of across the board. So that's why I've said focus on this, because I suppose that's the thing of me just working with horses and riders. I see so many horse and riders that some things become quite easy, if you like, to spot, and something that really does come up time and time again is, I'm not saying it's obviously the be all and end all, but pelvic dysfunction is typically a big issue. So like I said before, a big thing, and I honestly just can't stress it enough, is just think about how you are sitting at work, for example, or sitting generally. You can be doing so many different exercises to help yourself with that. You know, and you know, now I know that they in offices you can be asking for standing desks. It's really important to just be looking at all aspects of that, both from a sort of a general health basis, but also from obviously as a rider, because you can't, it's very hard to go from sitting like this all day long, or you know, at your computer, to then being like, oh, I want to be up here as a rider and be really loose and free and blah blah blah. So, and also just how you stand. A lot of riders will almost like sit on their bum and tuck their tummy out again. Like that's why you get a lot of, I think you get a lot of riders where they can find the movement, for example, and there's not much trunk stability going on. And just how people move in general. So I think actually a point I was chatting to Thea about is that, funnily enough, really recently, I had a owner that has spends thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on their horses, but they've been walking around in this pair of shoes that are just so awful, it's terrible. And I said to them, you know, you'll end up having an issue, like an issue. And lo and behold, they've gone and done an Achilles, they've done an Achilles injury. Of course, and it affects how you then put your feet in the stirrups and how you ride. And there has been a bit of research on that as well. Haven't got it to hand, but there has been research in regards to how you stand and how you ride, etc. So yeah, just even little things like that. Think about what what shoes you're in. There's no point you spending however much money on a horse's shoes constantly, and you're walking around the yard in, like most terribly fitted shoes going, because at the end of the day, you're the person that's got to go get on this horse and then expect it to perform. So it's little things like that, but they're the classic asymmetries that I see. And that's what I can say to you, like videoing, thinking a little bit more, try and be in the moment of thinking, what am I actually doing? Why is this horse doing this? Not to get, often you do see riders getting irritated with a horse, which is so, so unfortunate, because they do, 9 times out of 10, they really are trying for you. They get irritated with the horse, but it's because they're not actually asking the correct aids, and the horse hasn't got nowhere to go other than where they're going. So a stall's, quite a simple one, and there's lots and lots of different things you can do on that side of things. Oh, come on. Yeah, we're not going. Oh no, now we are. Functional stability, flexibility, and control. So these are definitely the fundamentals. Functional being the key term here, just because a lot of people say, oh, I can do a plank, for example, for however long. Well, that's grand, but you haven't got a horse moving underneath you. And the whole thing is you've got to be able to absorb. The whole thing of really being a rider is that you want the horse to be able to move as effectively as it can do without you interfering with it. So that's why the functional stability, mobility, etc., and the control come in. Again, going back to the soft tissue side of things, fascia is 3-dimensional. So if we dissected ourselves or our horses, you've got this 3-dimensional web, and there's no beginning or end. And often we always work diagonally. So when you have an issue, say with the shoulder, you can then, this is my right shoulder, you then get an issue with the left hip, and you often get the same things going on with horses. So it's really important to work at riders. That's where a lot of things come up. They've got a lot of stability, but they're sort of their stability mechanism can, in regards to it being functional, is sometimes where the problem comes in. Reactions also a really important one that I don't think a lot of people focus on. So of course horses spook, and there's constantly different movements, there's different things to look at. So reactive stabilities are a really important one. So muscle groups that we need to particularly focusing on, again, like you want to be thinking diagonal. I've got a rider there because banded clams, just such an easy one to do, and just happens to be that she's on her left side, to be truthful, but that is normally where a lot of riders will say they have issues in their lower extremities. It'll be the left side. So when you get a lot of spur marks, if you notice, will be on the left side. Again, it's that thing of riders sitting left, collapsing right. Typical, not saying that's a conclusive thing across the board, but again, say if I'm on the right rein here, a lot of riders will say, oh, I can't do something with their inside, something's happening with their inside, but actually what is most likely the problem is they're not stabilizing through the outside contact or the outside leg, etc. So that's why you need to be focusing on this probably more than you do this, but that's where things can sometimes go a bit wrong. And then riders don't recruit the right muscles, therefore they don't ask effectively, and that's where, of course, when you've got something else underneath you, that you know, you sort of get that miscommunication, and it can become a bit of a circle, if you like, you know, repetitive thing. So it's about just seeing how you can improve those things, and actually, but it's really important to work out actually what you're doing. And I suppose the biomechanics sessions, a lot of coaches, to be you know, not a lot of coaches getting so much better, but coaches will just say the horse, the horse, the horse. But you know, without being rude, if I went and put, you know, whoever on it, on if I put one of the Olympic riders on one of those horses, it probably wouldn't happen. So you've got to be thinking, okay, well, likelihood is it might well be me, so how am I going to sort it? So rather than going from the horse angle, I think it's really important to come at it from a rider angle, and then of course from the in terms of, for me with the biomechanics, I know the weaknesses and strengths of that horse and rider, so then I can figure out what's affecting what, if you know what I mean. But I can't really emphasize enough how much I find the two are so correlated. So I don't really work with any horse and rider, any horse or rider without the other, if that makes sense, just because for me, like in my brain, I'll be able to be like, okay, well, that's probably because of that. So it's just about, again, like thinking of looking at the whole picture, rather than just like, well, this is one, this is the other, because obviously you've got two together. So it seems really hard in my head to think about thinking of them independently, as in the horse or the rider. So I'd really say that's, again, another thing to just try and really concentrate on looking at both sides of the story and seeing what is actually happening. Warming up is a massive, well, warming up and cooling down. That is crazy that riders don't warm up. You know, you just wouldn't. There was, when the Rugby World Cup was on, I actually did like a video on my social media, and it was like the Lions. No, actually, sorry, it's because the Lions been on. Wales were out warming up on the pitch, and obviously they're out for ages because that's what athletes do. That's what most people do. Even if you went and played a five-a-side football at the park, guarantee you people would warm up. But for some unbeknown reason, it doesn't happen in equestrian sport, even at the highest levels. But it's just madness. And people would say, maybe, I've had a few riders say to me, well, I'm warming up when I ride the horse. But then, of course, if you're doing that, you're putting your functional asymmetry, you're putting your asymmetries onto the horse, you know, so you're warming up together, when actually you should be warming that horse up so that you're as symmetrical as you can be, because that's otherwise where things come in. But warming up is so important across the board. And I've also written about your psychological prep. So something I would say is, again, like, warm up to your discipline or whatever it well is, but we'll go through some of the things that are typical stretches, if you like, in equestrian sport that can really help. Obviously, like I said, hip mobility is really important. And just think about certain movements that you naturally have to do within your, and work to that. But I think just whilst we're talking about it, it's really important on a psychological basis to warm up. So more at those sort of, to be truthful, I can't actually remember what they're called, but those two aspects on that long-term performance development model, which was at the beginning. That's sort of like prominent ideology in regards to long-term athletic performance is that LTAD model. And one thing that always, you know, that is really, really important is to be looking at lots of different things, so lots of different skills. But in terms of your warm-up, for example, you want to be at those lower levels, you need to be thinking about making sure you're mentally ready as well. So a lot of people get quite nervous before they compete, and then of course when you get nervous, a lot of people stop breathing, and then it affects everything basically. Obviously very much on the soft tissue side of things, and the horse can, I think it's Dr. David Marlin that I was at a conference at, and they did a heart rate monitor, and they could see that when the rider's heart rate went up, so did the horses. But it's just like a constant, you know, it's like a whole circle. So it's about being in the right headspace, but also your body being as ready as possible. But yeah, I do think it's a little bit mental that, say, if you went and played football, you went out for a run, even like on a Sunday, people would warm up, but then they won't warm up when they're riding, and you've got a live animal with its own mind underneath you. So that's something I would really, really encourage getting into the thing of, and into the routine of. And also it really helps on an injury front. But once people get into it, it's literally just the getting into it. But once you do, people are just like, I can't believe I didn't, you know, warm up before. It gets you in the right headspace, you know, relaxes you, etc. But it also makes you concentrate, think about what you want to do. And I think that's a real important thing at, you know, whatever levels, and possibly actually, you know, at more lower levels, people that are competing out all the time, like the more professional riders, to be honest, they're used to competing, they're used to high pressured situations. But maybe if you're not out competing, you find that quite you know, that's a big thing for you. That's a really, you know, it's as important for you to be warming up in the lorry and, you know, making sure you're in the right headspace. So yeah, there's lots of different warm-ups, and I would say, you know, just try and think about what you're doing on the horse and how you can warm up effectively the things that you particularly struggle with. So I have put in here, yes, so functional asymmetry is a concern because both horse and rider can be affected. Asymmetric rider position appears to have an effect on the kinematics of the thoracolumbar spine of the equine. And Guire in 2014 investigated posture in 134 athletes, dressage riders, to determine anatomical asymmetry in the population of riders. Basically, what is often the thing that you'll find is, because obviously in equestrian sport you've got a lot of mucking out, you know, and then a lot of people are right-handed, etc. You'll often find that the right acromion is a lot higher, the iliac crest, etc. So when I do any soft tissue work, it's really important for me to be able to actually see you move, see the asymmetries, and we go through this functional movement screening so that we can see the movement deficiencies basically, and we look at different aspects and score it, and then obviously it's my job to try and improve that score as such. But you'll often find that that is a real problem. Again, I think that's why that links into that sitting over to the left, collapsing right, etc. But it's a hard one, because people will be like, okay, well, great, who's going to muck out for me? But it is just something to say that it's not, you know, I suppose like in other sports, it's not that typical to be that, you know, it is just those sort of classic things that you find of, you know, mucking out, sweeping, etc. If you really think about it, a lot of people are doing the same movement constantly. So then, of course, when you get on a horse, that sort of comes in. So they're the sort of things that I often find and are often correcting. And yeah, FMS screening is really, you know, FM screening is really important to be able to see, you know, to look at those imbalances and be able to work out what's actually happening and how we can decrease certain things, and obviously going back to that marginal gains and improve certain aspects. So these are really if I were to sort of put down the main things that you see in equestrian sport, so soft tissue damage is huge. Got different grades, obviously that's like how severe they are, how much time you need off, etc. I would say a lot of equestrian, I think in equestrian sport, you get, obviously in different sports, you get different cultures. And I would say that equestrian sport is very much like, you've got to get up, get on with it. But often that actually has more implications than what people think. So a lot of riders, when I go through a history form, I go right back. And so many things are just because, oh, I broke this arm, I never really got it looked at, or I just carried on, and it's like all quite funny as to how quickly they got back on, but actually it's come to haunt them for so many years, and obviously it's then affected all of those other horses. So soft tissue damage is really important, is a constant thing that you see of just, different grades, like different, I tore this or whatever. So that's a big one. Concussion, I think they're getting so much better at this, but again, it's just another thing that you see, and probably more, I suppose, at amateur level now. I think things get, it's not as regularly looked at. I think sometimes there's some, I know like a couple of clients where I'm like, I'm pretty sure you were concussed there, but it's just not so it's not so well looked after or known about, maybe. So that's a big thing. Fractures, then shoulder, neck, thoracic pain, obviously a constant thing for people that work at desks as well. Obviously it just comes with the territory of sitting at a desk. But lack of range of movement, huge, and again, like going back to all the different disciplines, it's a major thing that people need to be concentrating on, their range of movement. Headaches are actually a big thing. You get a lot of neck issues as well. And then lower back pain, again, like soft tissue damage. I really do think that, again, going back to the disc issues, impingements, so much is because a lot of people don't actually have very good core control, generalized stability. So I think, again, that comes back to just making sure what you do on a day-to-day basis, you're thinking of your general health as well as when you're riding a horse. Question time.
Okay, I'll jump in here and host that. So whilst you guys are thinking of some questions to pop in, and remember, there is no such thing as a daft question, I will ask a couple of questions that we had in advance, but just want to say there's some really brilliant things in here so far, Dee. I'm really picking up. So this reactive stability and kind of absorbing spooks is really important, actually. And I've noticed, I've been doing Pilates for the last 3 years now, and I've noticed, because my core's stronger now, I've had some awesome spooks from Johnny where I've literally been out on one leg, and I've managed to brace and get myself back. And my friend, who's also my instructor, was like, how did you do that? But I would not have been able to do it before without, my core becoming, there's still work to do, I have to say, but that one really struck me, actually, the reactive stability. And I'm going to look for my left side lower leg versus my right leg now, which I think is really quite interesting as well. It's kind of, you need people to sort of be spotting for you as well, don't you? And seeing
that's why as well, videoing, like I just don't think people video enough, because often people get coached and then they're just told, well, this is that, and without being thing towards coach, sometimes like people say, just say for example, they'll say you need to bring your right shoulder up, if they're here, which is or your left shoulder, whatever. But typically, again, it comes down to it's more actually the pelvic dysfunction that's the problem. So there's no good just trying to change something when actually the problem's coming from the pelvic area. And again, that's like something I see quite a lot of where people say, do this or do that, but actually it's and then again, just like a simple thing is I try and always not say, you know, if you say to somebody, don't think of a yellow car.
Oh yeah, they think of a yellow car. Yeah.
So I try and say, think of this, or think of that. Don't be like, don't put this up, or don't put that there.
Yeah.
Then that becomes like it. Sometimes in a question of sport, you often see like people, the problems always seem to stay the same problem. And it's really irritating, because you're just like, why am I not improving in this? But you might have an actual anatomical issue, you know, like soft tissue injuries, obviously, things as to why you physically cannot do something. So there's no good use spending all this money on coaching and training if you can't actually do what you're being asked of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes people are like, oh my God, you know, I just hadn't even realised what I was doing. But it's because, again, it's about becoming aware as to where you're sat. I think a lot of people don't think, where am I actually sat in the saddle? What am I? Because otherwise you get so engrossed in the doing, without actually coming out of it. And sometimes, like, I mean, admittedly, I don't actually have much time to ride at all now. But if I got really sort of like, you know, where you just, why is this not happening? It's sometimes just better to stop, get out your stirrups or stand up. Don't like shuffle around. That's the worst thing to do. Just get out your stirrups, sit back down, think, right, where am I? What am I asking? And take a deep breath. Lots of, even, do you know what? Even some of the highest levels, I will say, you know, like the top level, I will say, just breathe.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because people are like, do you know what? Just breathing. I hadn't even realised how stressed they were. And of course, it just goes into the rein contact. And that's the other thing. You've got to remember that rein contact. That's our connection to a horse. It's not meant to be a controlling aspect. It's about, we should be communicating with them through that. And that's why it's so important that we actually stay really strong through here, but these are staying really loose, and actually we're able to communicate. We're not actually, there's nothing worse, is there, like, than seeing something that's so restricted and it's not every single discipline, whatever it is, you want to see that sort of like harmonious, happy relationship. That really does come down to be truthful, you know, a rider's ability to absorb that horse's movement and, you know, their asymmetries, you know, etc., you know, balance, stability, functional movement, etc.
Yeah, someone said to me a great expression I've not heard before the other day. What's going on in the brain goes down the rein. Yeah. And it was a good way to sort of, you know, a nice rhyming way to remember it. And when we get tense, we shallow breathe, don't we? And we become quite stiff. And as you say, and if we're stressed here, we shallow breathe here, and then we're clamping perhaps on the rein. So actually the breathing is a really good way of just reboot. It's like pressing the button on the computer. Let's start again.
Yeah. And people sometimes, even if I'm in like a smaller arena or something, I'll always put a headset on somebody. But it's a two-way.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, like how much I can hear, because obviously you go from like chatting away, and then you say, oh, can you do this, or let's do that, and then it's like the radio silence, and it's like you've still got to breathe. So yeah, and obviously the horse picks up on that massively. So that's a really good sense. So what is it?
It's basically what's going on in the brain goes down the rein.
What's going down the rein? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's quite a good one, just to remind people what's going on in your brain right now, and is it transferring, as you say, on the communication.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I do often always say that to people, think about cutting your reins. If you're just going along your reins, what are you going to do? Most people, you know, back here, you want to be, I always say, like, have a bounce in the rein.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just so that you've got, it's not just constant, because
pull.
What does that feel like for them? You know, you should really be able to support you. Well, not should you know, you must be able to support your own self.
It's interesting as well that you said about getting somebody to video you and then looking back at it. In how many weeks time is it? Summer 26. So 3 weeks time, we've got Sue Dyson, and she's covering how you recognise behavioural signs of discomfort. And she's written, so there are 24 behaviours, and she's written a dressage test, if you like, not a proper one, but a series of movements. And she says, video these movements and look at the horse. And it'd be interesting. Here's an idea for you. Write a similar one, but video the rider, and look for collapsing. And
that's such a good idea.
Yeah, like a tip, because she calls it an ethogram. It's a checklist of it, basically. So video it, look at it back, tick off how many of these slumping or asymmetric behaviours can you see. And then you've got something to work on, because we don't look at ourselves enough, I guess, do we?
That is it. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. And I'll get in touch with Sue, the god of therapy, as we call her. I'll get. It's a really good point. But yeah, you do start seeing the same
behaviours and
same
indicators.
Yeah.
We've got a question here from Lynn. I have had a revision hip operation. In brackets, this is Lynn's words. I bet you're not old, Lynn. That's because I'm old, she says. I now also have a leg length difference. We all have, but I'm guessing Lynn's is now exacerbated by this. Could you give me some exercises that would help me stretch and loosen? Thank you.
Next, let's strength and loosen. I think I'm always a little bit conscious of the I don't know certain, because what often happens with riders is they're also not saying this. Is it Lynn?
Yes.
Not saying this is you, Lynn, but it's quite amazing how many people will be like, oh, I totally forgot I broke my right leg as well. And there's lots of different variables. So I'd say she wants to go to somebody, really. The biggest thing is somebody that does a lot with riders, hopefully. But to be truthful, to begin with, like if you really have got that leg length disparity, people might not agree with me on this, but I would be inclined, if it's really affecting her riding, to actually shorten the one stirrup so that she's not searching for that stirrup. And obviously increase your strength, your hip mobility, just in general. You can do so many different, it's all just hip mobility, that is hip mobility, strengths. You can be doing calf raises, things like, just to get that. I love calf raises, and you can also work on your balance. So for example, obviously stand on the bottom of a stair, hold on to one little section, and then gradually get where you're not, but do some calf raises and really get that heel down, then come up. Just again, you're working on your balance, but at the same time, it's just getting her confident. A lot of people don't actually put enough weight, or they're not on the right area of, they've either put their foot sort of like this, or they're, right out here. But it's about, I think a big thing that she might find is her feeling of support in that stirrup. So you just want to try and gradually get, there's no point if you, where she will have that leg length difference. Obviously it's not ideal, but if you do, it would be better to have the leg, the stirrup shorter and get the right amount of pressure down both areas than her sitting over and constantly searching for that.
Because then she might be,
you're doing more, and then because you're searching for something, the knee then comes up. So actually doing the opposite. So I'd be more inclined to just try and get her to actually get confident with that. But yeah, really, you're just looking at general hip mobility, but I'd be a little bit thing of exactly what to do, because there's so many different aspects of that. That's what becomes difficult, because everyone is so individual, and riders do have a long history.
We forget all the injuries, don't we? We're so like blasé about it. And you're going to come on to a few exercises that you're going to share in the second half, aren't you? Should I just ask a couple of questions here? We've got one here, actually. I do Pilates every week. Is there anything that my instructor could tweak for me to make it more riding specific? So I guess it's kind of, is Pilates okay, and what are the things to focus on within it?
Pilates is super. I think all riders should be doing Pilates, but it's really important, again, like you're saying, to try and be as sport specific as you can. Go back to those things of like dressage, show jumping, eventing. You'll typically get key things that you want. So even just real simple, that, you know, like you've got to be, there's some exercises in Pilates that you don't really are not that great for equestrian sport.
Okay. What would be an example of something that wasn't so good?
So for example, if you struggle, some riders really struggle with lower back pain, for example. So if people like sat at a desk all day, for example, and they struggle with lower back issues, doing that sort of cobra exercise, it can really, some people can be like, I did that and oh God, my back was in pieces. So you want to be thinking more about gentle work of just trying to get that mobility, but without putting it into such a, oh, you know, I'm there. So it's just little things, but you can, with the Pilates, I would just say some real simple things to just be thinking about. Again, go back to your sort of posture is a major thing. Any sort of work that you're doing where you're coming back with your shoulder girdle control, make sure it's not coming from the neck. You've got to be thinking, I always think about, you know, like a cross in the middle of your back, for example. Make sure everything's coming from that, you know, your thoracic rotation. Be focusing on all things that you know, your strength with your legs. You know, you've got to, I know when I actually went to Pilates thing down the road in winter, and they'd taken some of my, I've got so many exercises on, if you go on the website, on resources, I did these exercises for horse and hound. And there's one we did where it's like she was doing it, I can't remember which way she was doing it, but she saw that I did one where it's like a rider one. So you've got a resistance band, a little mini band around your feet. Put it where the stirrups are, like, because otherwise they'll start putting it down here. Try and mimic lots of different things as to like where you put that resistance band, for example. Try and get as much, you know, strength through that leg, but keeping the core down, making sure you keep your back down. You can bring lots of, but be focusing a lot on the lats, you know, obliques. They're all the main sort of areas. And, you know, your you know, definitely until the cows come home, work on the pelvis. And Pilates, if you say about what the, you know, obviously you're sitting with your legs apart, for example, somebody that sat at a desk all day, you want to be doing the opposite. So don't be doing lots of things that are all here. You've got to be to just try and get your, because otherwise that's why when you get fatigued, you get tighter, and then that's where I was saying you use your tack for support. And the other thing, that's a little bit off topic, but sometimes saddles, I'm not at all a saddle fitter, and I just don't get involved in it. But the only thing I would say is sometimes there's how they, some of the saddles that people have, although they might think, oh, that's great for support, you don't want to become reliant on like those, you know, those pads, for example. Sometimes it can actually block the movement. So just try and think, okay, well, that's great that I've got that, but I shouldn't become reliant upon it either. But yeah, just all, but you know, all lots of basic things that you can, you know, like I said, anything hit with resistance, because always remember, keep it functional. So you know, if you were doing like if you were doing a plank, for example, be in a side plank, bring a weight up, come underneath you, so that you're working your obliques at the same time, but you're looking at your shoulder girdle control. You know, you're bringing you know, movement into it. So it's all about being functional.
Brilliant. That's really great. Well, we'll let you carry on now, and then we'll take more questions at the end. Okay, I'll disappear again.
See if I can actually go through it. Oh, there we are. Back. So core, often people will say, You know, use your core, but a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people actually don't know how to engage their core or what their core is. So these are your core muscles that you can see. Why as well, so reduce strain on both the horse and the rider, creates independent seat, shock absorber. Something also like to just try and think again, like sort of what Thea's saying is, if you were to carry a backpack and it had it was filled half with water, and you had to carry that around on a run, or you had the same backpack filled with sand, it's a lot easier to carry that sandbag than it is obviously water that's unstable. And that's why it's so important for riders to be focusing on their core stability, just so that, because otherwise for a horse, they're not designed to obviously have us, you know, sitting around and jumping around on their back. So that's why as well, it's just so important to be working on your core to be able to absorb all of that movement without putting unnecessary strain on the horse's spine as well as our own. The other, so 4 core categories and things, again, like this is good from a stretching front, but again, just be careful, because I don't know what all of your, you know, histories are, for example, but anti-rotation, resisting a rotation of the lumbar spine, really important. So I've got an exercise in here later of just like a Palloff press, for example. But going back to what Thea was saying of like horses spooking, etc., is so important for us to be able to quickly absorb a movement and to have a lot of well, flexibility really in that area, but also the stability. So single leg RDLs, really good for this sort of thing. You know, lots and lots of different things you can do, but bringing in the resistance bands on these side of things is super. So anti-extension, obviously for eventers, you're back here quite a lot, you know, depending on what you're doing, but resisting that extension, being able to support yourself, because often you'll see a lot of riders where they go, whoop, whoop, you know, all the way forward. You've got to, it's that thing of being able to support yourself and not, you know, bringing such impact. And to be truthful, you get, you know, it's also a real thing of the disciplines, like I said, about different somatotypes in terms of your body conditioning. But you'll often find that a lot of people will struggle with that side of things. But plank, dead bug, so dead bug is a really good one. You can bring resistance work into that. You know, there's lots of, and also with the dead bugs, what I'll also do with people is, say if you've got you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, the legs at a 90-degree angle in the air and you're on your back, you've got to go right leg, left arm, left leg, left arm, double leg, double arm, but quickly, and it brings the reaction side into it. So that's a good one, but obviously it's about you being able to not have such huge amounts of movement within, you know, when you're riding, especially like for show jumping, eventing, etc. Anti-flexion, any exercise where the purpose is to resist a forward flexion of the spine, so back extension holds are great, glute bridges. But again, with the glute bridges, bring in movement, you know, bring in weight, for example, that's really important. So just always, again, try and think about how you can make it more specific. So for example, a glute bridge, bring one leg up and be thinking about where your pelvis is so that you're not coming down on one side. And then if you have like a sandbag or something, you can makes you think about where you're going. Lateral, anti-lateral flexion, so where we say about the side plank, for example, but again, don't just do a plank because it's not a huge amount of use to you. So like I said, be bringing in all that, bringing in weight, bringing in resistance. You can do so many different things, but again, it brings that stability, mobility, you know, your core control into that. Suitcase carries like an easy one. And all of these things, the other thing is that on a yard, you've got, you know, shavings, bags of shavings, you've got sweeping, what am I going to say? Sweeping equipment and a brush, you can just be using that, for example, for your thoracic rotation. Then you can be using, I don't know, buckets of feed for your walking lunges. You can use the shavings for your press ups and, you know, glute bridges and things like that. There's so many different things. Then when it's really nice weather, not that it is at the moment, but you can, in the school, you can be using the poles, for example. You can be doing your squats and everything. You can be doing so many different things. We're actually really blessed with being outside, having lots of, it's just about being, you know, imaginative, and you don't need to have a gym. It's just about starting with the basic things and thinking about what you need to improve on yourself, basically. So some of the things that I really enjoy doing and I'd encourage you to do. So this admittedly is a slightly advanced one, but I didn't actually have a photo for what I was wanting to talk about, but basically just get where you will sit on a Swiss ball. You will be amazed. Pick your feet up, you'll see exactly where you go, because the ball can't lie. So you want to literally be able to sit comfortably, put your feet up without doing this with your knees, for example, and your ankles, and be able to relax. Again, it's that breathing thing, and be able to fit, you know, if you're coming over here slightly, be able to put yourself back to an area of balance. And again, that comes back to riders actually being able to think, where am I in the saddle? What can I do to stop the horse falling out through the left shoulder, or whatever it may be? But you can then add like dynamic stability to that. So for example, get people throwing stuff to you whilst you're sat on there. Use a resistance band, be doing a lot of shoulder girdle control. Again, it's just all different things that you can do to, you know, to help yourself. But you'll see a lot of people like bring a shoulder up, for example, to stabilize. So do it in front of a mirror, and then this would be like the sort of you know, advancement, if you like, onto that. But you've got to be, just be careful with that. Don't do anything crazy. Dead bug was what I was saying about earlier. So you're maintaining a 90-degree hip angle all the time, but having a weight in each hand. Again, like I said, you know, you can get someone to do coaching cues to you. So different, you know, how you can make it harder. You can add a resistance band, for example. Then going back to what I was saying about like the Pilates, you can have a mini band by both legs and that you push down, so that you're just trying to get yourself where those calves really reach into those stirrups. All just things about you trying to make it as, you know, rider specific as possible. And like I said, on a three-dimensional basis, you know, you really do have this, you know, diagonal correlation. So that's why these are really good exercises. And it also gets you thinking, going back to that thing of, you know, when horses are spooking, it's about you being able to react quicker. Back extension holds, be careful with these ones. I just put this in because it's actually quite an easy one for people to do. Obviously not like this kit, but you can do lots of different things, like in here, if you like, with the ball, but you can do lots of different things on that side of things. But it's very posterior chain based, and like I said, that comes across in all the disciplines. You know, your posterior chain is huge area to focus on, but it's about keeping that neutral position the whole time, and just strengthening those areas. You can do, just whilst I'm looking at this, Steve, who's on that, you could, for example, in where he's got both his feet on the ball, you take one leg off to advance it, and then of course you've got to keep your pelvis as straight as possible. Again, it's just like coming into trying to make it as equestrian specific as possible, of being able to stabilize on one leg but move the other leg at the same time. Palloff press is awesome. You can do it anywhere. Resistance bands as cheap as chips. So again, it's just that thing about not gripping too much on the actual band, and it being very much like strengthening and supporting spinal stability. you don't want to, sometimes people do this a bit too quickly, but yeah, basically you can make it harder and harder by increasing the resistance, but it's a really good one for those obliques. Obviously it makes you think about where not dipping through one area of the pelvis, for example. There's so many different things you can do, but that's just a real stock standard one that I would say is great for anybody. And then, like I was saying earlier, going back to that LTPD model, that as you sort of go through the levels, you'll find that they'll obviously go through the Olympic cycle. Obviously, we only got 3 years now before Paris, but I think no matter what level you're at, it's really important to have goals. So these go by a SMART system just because it's an easy one to remember. So specific, that's obviously number one. You've got to really think, what do I want to accomplish? And I would say be specific, both off the horse and on the horse. And again, there's such a correlation that if you improve your functional stability, mobility, control off a horse, it will 100% help your stability, mobility, control on a horse. So, but you've got to be specific with what you're wanting. It's not just like, you know, crack on with any old thing. Measurable. So it needs some time, like don't make the goal too, you know, make sure that you can measure the progress. Achievable, again, like it's just that thing of don't be too far flung with that, but equally it's really important to dream big. So set shorter goals, but also longer ones. You know, think about all of the, you know, you can go by year, month by month, whatever suits you. Realistic and timely, like I said. So these are really important things. I've said as well, like if you can today, write down just one short-term and one long-term realistic goal from today, like if there's anything that you've particularly picked up on. And often it's the case, if you write something down, you'll naturally be more inclined to put it into practice, because often, you know, we're all the same, like you think, oh yeah, I want to do that, but do you actually do it? So if you can, write something down even now, just like, I would like to improve this, but try and be as specific as you can be, because you're more likely to actually, you know, to get there, basically. Evaluating at all levels. So discipline, specific, strength conditioning. Hopefully that's come across enough of just, you know, it is, the other thing is like quite coach dependent as well as to what your, and discipline specific, discipline dependent as to how you often see like show jumper, you can kind of tell how a show jumper rides, a dressage rider, etc. But try and be discipline specific with your S&C work, because it will really help. And if you're, you know, working on everything, take little bits of everything, but think about what you specifically need to focus on yourself a lot of. Wider contribution, I think, like I said at the beginning, I think that's just honestly so important. If you feel like you've got a lot of people supporting you, whatever level that may be, and whoever those people are, it obviously just helps. So it's really important to be looking at both like the wider contribution, but also going back to how you can help your own self. Don't just think of just the horse with this. It's all got to be about how can you help this, how can you help that. And again, going back to that thing of, if you take each piece, going back to that marginal gains theory, if you think of each piece of what you can improve, even if it's just by 1%, I appreciate a lot of people on a time factor, they're not on the yard all day long. So just think, how can I improve like this little section? If there's somebody that can help you as well, improve that. And evaluate to improve. So you've got to think, okay, well, how am I going to monitor that? How am I actually going to see how I'm doing, what I'm doing, etc. And like I said, I'd look at video analysis on that and look at how you can improve your physical goals a little bit more. But you know, those sort of things are just really, really important. And it's just about, again, looking at you both as athletes, not just the horse or the rider, not to sort of neglect yourself as such.
What a great statement. Don't neglect yourself. We need a bit of rider self-care, don't we, going on here as well. Absolutely fantastic. I've got a question here actually, because you've talked about warming up and we had a question about warming down. So post riding, now that I'm older, I find I'm achy a day after as if I go for a long ride. Is there anything I should do after riding?
Stretch.
Yeah.
Stretch. Yeah. But it's just about, you know, what is she, I'm not saying to say now, but, you know, stretching afterwards, it's the exact same as a horse. You know, you need your warm up and your cool down is as important. Sorry, I just put warm up in there, but it is as important. And then just little things like it, again, like it's just my mind of like looking at more the bigger picture. You know, a good diet is obviously really important because you can be doing you can be doing all of these things, but if you've got a bad diet, that will then affect your sleep, it will affect your, you know, then it affects everything, you know, your soft tissue in terms of your flexibility. It's the whole thing. So if she's struggling, it might also be that she needs something on a diet basis of, you know, is she not getting something? So it's about looking at all areas.
Yeah.
Stretching is probably what I'd say on that, but not neglect all the other areas either.
Yeah. Okay. So make sure you do your little warm down as well as your warm up, basically. And there was a really interesting question from someone asking about their children, actually. I'd like to know what exercises are good for children to do now that will make it easier for them. I think you're going to say stretching again, aren't you? That will make it easier for them when they're older.
Right. I'd say, actually, to be truthful, when you you know that long-term athletic development model, that was the BEF one, but
yeah,
in general, so I've done a lot of I actually did a lot of research on this years ago, but basically if you look at all elite athletes, you will often find that when they're younger, they've done a very, very broad spectrum of sports. They actually specialize. That we are unfortunately, and it's actually to the detriment, but specializing earlier. But actually you want to be doing as many sports as possible, basically. I'm not saying literally chuck your kid in every single thing, like come on, you're doing this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But at the same, it's just about being as well-rounded as possible, because obviously when different sports have different things that you've got to be good at. So for example, you're like, I'll often see riders at high levels where they've been very good at like ballet, for example, when they're older, because if you actually think about it, if you not ballet dancer,
you're going to give us a demo.
That thing of that they have that control from their head to their toe, of that composure, that balance, that, you know, it's the finesse of everything, you know, they can finish it off basically. And be in control of each. And, you know, when you I always obviously go from like a fascial side of things, that you're working the whole system then. But then you've got also that reaction thing, like basketball, tennis, you know, that hand-eye coordination. Again, that comes into equestrian sport hugely. But I would say, look, actually, to be truthful, if you looked at research, the biggest thing, not saying, you know, I'm not trying to make this parent where they're like, you know,
taxi of mum and dad every night,
but to be, in terms of a successful athlete, normally you'll find that they've done a lot of, you know, lacrosse comes up quite a bit, they've done a lot of things. But if I'm honest, the biggest thing that, like, and I'm really lucky, I work with some young athletes, and I absolutely love working with them, because obviously you see them grow and you become, you know, quite well connected with them, I suppose. But the one thing I would say is enjoyment, because if you specialize too early with younger kids, sometimes it becomes, and especially equestrian sport, you know, from the research I've done, a lot sometimes will come down to the there's a lot of pressure, because obviously it's financially, you know, there's a lot of financial pressure with it, and this, that, the other. So typically you find that if kids enjoy sport and enjoy lots of different sports, when they specialize, they're a lot more well-rounded athletes. And they've got a lot more skills, and you know, they're just more well-rounded. Whereas if you go all to one, you don't quite get that, basically.
Yeah, no, I get that. So yeah, it's kind of a variety for mind and variety for the body development as well, isn't it?
And them in the sport, obviously.
Yeah. And then maybe just one last quick one, and then we'll draw to a close. Yeah, which one to pick? Well, there's one here about aerobic fitness. So somebody wants to increase their aerobic fitness but finds running really hard on their knees. What could you recommend in terms of an aerobic and increasing aerobic fitness?
Swimming's brilliant.
Yeah.
You've then not got any pressure at all on your knees. Swimming's awesome. Cycling, rowing.
Yeah.
Battle ropes.
Oh yeah.
It's just really what you're saying is, as well, it's about bringing your heart rate up.
Yeah. So
you can do lots of different. I appreciate swimming, you've got to have a pool and everything, but they're really good areas. And again, it is really, like, I didn't touch too much on that, but it's really important to be working on your aerobic and your anaerobic fitness. Again, that's a little bit discipline specific, but yeah, you need to be getting your heart rate up, so that you can, you know, and just something like briefly that I know we spoke about there is just, you know, sometimes you should really be able to do basic things of, you know, run around your, you know, a lot of people obviously when you're at a yard, there's a lot of room, go for runs, don't just be riding, you know, you've got to be doing lots of different areas of fitness. Go swimming, it's not a waste of your time. You don't, you know, it shouldn't be this thing of, well, I'd rather be riding. It will inevitably help your riding and help your body and all sorts of things. But yeah, for her particularly, swimming, cycling, rowing, those sorts of things.
And cycling, I suppose you're sitting in sort of the position that you would riding, so you're kind of aerobically working in that sort of but not quite. That was polite. That was a polite no.
No, but if you cycle a lot, just to say, if you cycle or run a lot, obviously you're doing this.
Yeah.
So you always want to be doing, and if you say, let's go swimming, if you're doing a lot of breaststroke, if that's your main, you'd also have to do, I used to work in swimming, but you also would have to do the opposite, because you've got to be training, you know how I'm saying about that 3-dimensional structure, and stability being a key thing. You've got to be looking at, okay, well, if I do a lot of this, so for example, you know, if you're sat at your desk, sit on a Swiss ball, don't sit on a desk, you know, and you can do lots of it for people that are sitting at desks. Another thing that I get riders doing is when you're sat at your desk or on your ball, start rotating your pelvis, sit on your left seat bone, sit on your right seat bone, get comfortable with knowing where you're sat. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of different things you can be doing, but yeah, if you're, where you say about the cycling, obviously if you're doing that quite a lot, then of course when you're wanting to do this with your pelvis, it can you can, a lot of people wind up their hip flexors, glute strength isn't so great, etc., and then it becomes all a bit of a, that's what I was saying about pelvic dysfunction. So actually you need to make sure you're doing a lot of hip mobility strengthening work.
Okay, fantastic. I do remember, just when you said about running, I remember listening to William Fox Pitt say that for fitness, he used to not only go for a run, but he'd go and run up the sand gallops. That's aerobic, and that might be anaerobic actually. It's such hard work, but yeah,
you know the event, I mean, I don't know if you watch Tokyo, the eventers, but of course some of them have flags, hey, you know, like it is endurance, you know, you've got to be really fit, but the horse has got to be really fit. And you know, some of those riders, they've got to be so fit to be able to coax that horse home. I know it's the extreme, but it's just the point of, you know, whatever level, you know, we have had some really hot weather, And you know, I know there's been actually a few incidents recently of just, you know, a lot of riders and horses not being fit enough. So yeah, you've got to be looking at all aspects, but just working on yourself, it honestly will pay so many dividends to you as a rider. And I think, you know, when you naturally feel fitter, more conditioned for something, typically you enjoy it a lot more. And you know, like what we were saying with horses, to be honest, a lot of the problems I see, it's because the rider can't physically do something, then they become irritated with it, and then it becomes all this sort of cycle, and you know, then the horse picks up their asymmetries, etc. And then always the beauty of horses is they will always try for us, you know. So it's really important to give them the benefit of the doubt and just think, okay, well, what can I actually get, rather than me always being like, well, what can I do for this horse? What can you do for yourself that will improve your horse? Yeah,
I love that. We'll leave that on the message of enjoyment, that is investing in yourself for greater enjoyment, because that's what we're all about. Well, thank you so much, Dee. It's been really, really interesting. I could actually think of a million, there's loads more questions. I can think of a million more questions to ask you, but we will let you go tonight. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And look out for the next webinars. We've got the 26th of August, we have, as I mentioned, Sue Dyson, and she'll be helping us understand the behavioural signs of discomfort. And then on the 9th of September, we've got Susie D'Ambrosio coming back to talk about hacking problems solved. So we'll end now, and we'll see you again. Thanks very much, Dee.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.